So thanks for being here. It really is a pleasure to be here. It's so wild. I've been doing this work a very long time, and it's always amazing to see so many familiar faces and very new faces, which is what you want. I don't want to recognize everybody, because if I do, that means we're doing something really wrong. So it's really glad to be here. And I always say, you could be anywhere else, and I really appreciate you being here. So thank you. And I don't want to waste your time, because I might be talking about some things that aren't familiar. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So raise your hand if you've heard of vegetables. Anybody have heard of vegetables? All right. Fruits. All right. Well done. Beans, grains, herbs and spices. Wow. Okay. You guys are a pretty good crowd. You know more than I thought. So I jest, because the way vegans sometimes and non-vegans can talk about vegan food is if you have like normal food over here and then you have vegan food over here, like it's a separate food group. I'm sure we have all heard that. And I really do say that because I think we can overuse the word vegan in our desire to normalize veganism. But I think what winds up happening is we make it sound like it's so different and unfamiliar than what we're already eating, when in reality, vegan food, and I have to put it in quotes, is fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and beans and mushrooms and grains and herbs and spices, right? That's what it is. Everybody familiar with those, right? We've all eaten those, right? And when it comes to baking, it's flour and sugar and baking soda and baking powder, cocoa, chocolate, yeast, right? All the things we already have in our cupboard. We just don't call vegan, usually until there's a vegan in the room. That's when we usually identify things as vegan. Like, oh, you're eating that apple. Yes, because it's an apple. There aren't vegan apples and then apples. So I really do want to emphasize that, because I think when we take it out of the box called vegan, we go a long way in normalizing vegan food. So you will constantly see me put vegan in quotes. And there's a lot to say about that. I could say a lot about this, even in terms of how we frame the food when it comes to restaurants, when it comes to menus. There's a lot to say around the way it's marketed. You might have an amazing restaurant who put vegan items on the menu, but then just called it the vegan menu, and no one's going to order that food but vegans, and so they take it off the menu because no one else ordered it. So there's a lot to say around how to use the word, but that is not the topic of today's conversation. So I just wanted to get that out of the way and make sure we're all on the same page and you know what that is. So my name is Colleen Patrick Goudreau, and the mission in my work is to empower people to make informed food choices, to debunk myths about veganism, to be a voice for animals, and to give people the tools and resources they need to live according to their own values of compassion and wellness. And I say that because I am not asking anyone to live according to my values. I'm urging people to live according to their own values. And there's always a misconception that vegans are imposing their values on other people. So I'm here to say, I am here to be a conduit because I have been through the same journey that everyone is on here, wherever we are, different points in the spectrum. And I've just been doing this for 26 years. I became vegan 26 years ago. And so I've been doing this work through a number of different mediums. I'm in the 18th year of my podcast called Food for Thought. I was doing podcasts before I knew what podcasts were. I don't even know that. I didn't even know what they were. And I just started talking and people started listening. So I just kept doing it and I haven't stopped. So I have some books out on the table. So my first baby was The Joy of Vegan Baking, to demystify baking. The next book was The Vegan Table, Color Me Vegan, and Vegan's Daily Companion, all three of which are now out of print, but you can find them still. The Joy of Vegan Baking is still in print. My first baby, very proud of that book. And then I wrote the book, The 30-Day Vegan Challenge, to guide people through the transition, to answer all the questions that people typically have. And then I wrote The Joyful Vegan, to help people stay vegan in a non-vegan world. We're going to talk about some of that today. I know there's a mixed crowd here, so I just want to make sure that we're touching kind of all the things that help you in this non-vegan world, wherever you are on your journey. And if there's things I say that you already know, then, if there's a way I frame it that might be helpful for you when you're advocating, then take that with you. And then my most recent book is A Year of Compassion, 30 weeks. There's 52 weeks in a year, 52 weeks of living zero waste, plant-based, and cruelty-free. And I'm very grateful also to just do this work. I mean, I've been doing this as a speaker, as a writer. I get to travel around the world and host vegan trips around the world because everything I do is about demonstrating the joy and abundance of living compassionately and healthfully. And I have been on this journey as a pescatarian, vegetarian, vegan, and that's usually how this process goes. And I certainly wasn't always vegan. I did not look at this thing called vegan and say, that's a club I want to join. It's going to cause disharmony in my family. It's going to make me the butt of some pretty predictable jokes, frankly, but yeah, going to be the butt of jokes. It is going to compel me to become an expert in history and philosophy and nutrition and animal husbandry and ecology and the culinary arts, but whatever, sign me up. Never sought to do that. Rather, I think like with most people, there was a moment when I realized I didn't want to contribute to people doing to animals things I would never have done to animals myself. And so my instinct when I had that awakening was to align my values in my behavior, was to reflect my ethics in my behavior, in my actions. And so I became vegan. And I'm really struck by that phrase, become vegan, because it's very interesting because it sounds like we become something different when we become vegan, right? When we say an acorn becomes an oak tree or a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, we can easily imagine the transformation before and after. But when I became vegan, I could still recognize myself. So what did that mean for me to become vegan, right? Because before I was vegan, I was still a compassionate person. I cared about animals. I didn't want to hurt animals. Cared about my health. I worked in a health food store. Like, I actually didn't want to do the things that I knew contributed to harm. And yet, I wasn't fully living in accordance with my values, right? I was paying other people to do to animals what I never would have done myself. And so when I had the moment, when I had that awakening of what I was doing, I made this transition. But what I like to say is that I didn't become vegan as much as I removed the blocks to the compassion that was already inside of me. And I think it's the compassion that's in all of us. And I think that's what it is. It's all the muck that just covers up and blocks and creates conditions to our compassion. And so that's for me what it is. It's a lot faster to just say I became vegan. I realize that. But the whole point I want to make is that we can frame this thing vegan in a way that makes it sound like the whole point is to be vegan, that the end goal is being vegan. And for me, that is not the point. The point, the end, the goal is to live as compassionately as possible, to live as healthfully as possible. And it turns out that this thing vegan is one of the easiest, fastest, most effective, and certainly the most delicious way to get there. And so that is my point. Compassion is the goal. Optimal wellness is the goal. And being vegan is the way to get there. And so my story is like everybody else's story. I think the stuff that we experience, all that muck that covers up our compassion, is the stories we're told and the stories we tell. The stories were told by our families, the stories were told by our societies, not in any way to hurt us, but in ways to keep us all kind of facing the same direction, right? So I grew up back east, eating everything that walked or swam or flew. My parents supported me loving animals. I was that kid who loved animals. I was the kid who had to talk to every animal on the street, bring in stray animals. There was a bird. I remember the story so vividly. I must have been about 7. A bird fell, broke her wing. I'm weeping. My mother had to drag me out of Benji because I was crying so hard. Remember Benji? Somebody remember Benji? You don't remember Benji? Oh my God. I still can't even hear the music in my head without like crying. So, but our parents do this. Like, we are dressed in everything that has images of animals all over our pajamas, all over our clothing. We have mobiles above our beds. We have our bedclothes are have images of animals all over them. We are read books that use animals to teach us how to read, to teach us how to count, to teach us how to spell. And we also have all of those books that teach us how to be social creatures, right? We're brought to the zoo to see animals, to a petting zoo to interact with animals. Of course, many of us have them in our home. So in every way, we use animals to demonstrate how connected we are to other animals. And in fact, we also as a society use animals and how children treat them as a barometer for mental health. We know that if there's especially consistent cruelty toward other animals, we know the direct link to violence against humans as well. So in every way, we are taught that animals are an integral part of who we are and who we're becoming. So I was that kid, and I ate animals. I had no idea I was eating animals. And I remember a couple conversations, maybe asking my mom, why, when you start making the connections. And they give me the same excuses and the same justifications that we all do. They're here for us. They don't feel the same pain as we do. They're sacrificing themselves for us. That's the nature of things, all the things we tell ourselves to continue. My mother wasn't trying to hurt me. In fact, I think in some ways she was trying to protect me because she knew how sensitive I was and how devastated I would have been understanding that I was contributing to any animal being harmed. So life goes on. We develop the taste for the fat and the flesh of other animals, and we develop those habits, and now they're ingrained. I mean, our habits are ingrained in us by the time we're 6, 7, right? So anyone who's like, I'm 70, I'm 60, I'm 50, I can't make a change. It doesn't matter how old we are once we want to make the change. The habits were ingrained when we were young. So it doesn't matter. There's no behavioral therapist that says, it takes 4 weeks to change a habit if you're 30, but it takes 8 weeks to change a habit if you're 60. I mean, that's just not what it is. A habit is a habit is a habit, right? So it became a habit for me, and I quelled that really innate, strong compassion, right? Not in a way that made me want to hurt animals, but in a way that I would make my own justifications to continue eating them, right? And so I did. I went along, and it wasn't until I picked up a book, and I have to say, it was John Robbins' book. We just lost John Robbins this year. And he wrote Diet for New America. And it was the first book that was out that talked about the effects of consuming meat, dairy, and eggs. Not just consuming, but agriculture as well. The raising and killing of animals and eating animals on our health, on the environment, and on the animals. And it was the first time I had ever read anything like that. It was the first time I had seen photos of any kind of factory system. And my immediate inclination was to stop eating land animals. Now, I must have skipped the points about eggs and dairy because I continued eating eggs and dairy, even though we talked about eggs and dairy. My father had owned a couple ice cream stores, and so there was this link between like Baskin-Robbins and John Robbins' work and me growing up, so it was kind of fun, but missed that part. Kept eating dairy, kept eating eggs. And then years go by, and eventually I read a book. I did read other books. I did read happy books, I promise you, but I read a book called Slaughterhouse, and that was the book that completely woke me up. And everybody has a different story like this. There's always a moment, there's always a point, there's always something that kind of turns you over and wakes you up. Could be a book, could be a podcast, could be a conversation, could be a piece of, food you have, it could be anything. And for me, it was reading this book. And what this book did for me was make the connection not just that I wasn't comfortable contributing to factory farming, but that I realized that I was contributing to violence. And it's an inherently violent system. So I don't need to give you any details. Our imaginations are strong enough for you to imagine. But reading about the stories of people who worked in slaughterhouses, I realized that I was contributing to systemic violence and contributing to people being desensitized to their own compassion and being desensitized to animal suffering. And it was like an awakening. I mean, literally, I just remember the emotions I felt. And it was like all of that muck just disappeared. That's what that awakening is. And, there's a lot more to say about kind of what happens after that, because my book, The Joyful Vegan, really is what happens once you become vegan. Because the story just begins at that point, right? Because there's so much to navigate in a world that doesn't necessarily support us living as compassionately and healthfully as possible. So I was that person. I did all the things. I immediately became an advocate. And that's where I am today. And so we all have we have different details, but really, it really usually hinges on some kind of moment we have when we have some kind of awakening. And, that's a beautiful thing. I mean, it isn't just an incredible thing. It's one of the best things I've ever done was experience that. And everybody comes for a different reason. It could be health, it could be ethics, it could be the environment. There are so many reasons. I always say pick a reason, and any one of them would be a reason to eat a plant-based diet. And so we see things changing. I've been doing this work for 26 years as a vegan. I mean, I was an animal advocate and vegetarian before that. So I've been doing this work a long time. And I have seen progress and I have seen change. People always ask me, they want me to predict the future about what the future looks like for, veganism. And I have seen change. But truly what has to be said is the question, not have you seen change, but what really stops people from changing? What really compels people to continue doing the things they know we know are harmful to themselves, to the environment, to the animals, that trifecta we constantly point to. And so that's really where I see my work. Again, The Joyful Vegan, especially the first chapter on willful blindness, talks a lot about really what it is that compels people to continue doing things they know hurts them even. So I want every vegan to read this book to really understand why we're living in this world, why you have really kind, compassionate friends and family members who aren't manifesting it in the way that we want them to manifest it. And, a big part of it is because, like I said, we do not live in a culture that makes it easy for us to make healthy choices. We don't live in a culture that makes it easy for us to make the most compassionate choices. And also because we are creatures of habit. I mean, they are very, very, very strong. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is, kind of the things, the blocks, the myths, the misconceptions that stop people from doing the very thing that they know is going to benefit themselves and benefit the things they care about, right? So what are some of those blocks? I mean, we can categorize them into social aspects, nutrition, and I'll say fear of, or misconceptions about nutrition and food. But really in the end, and I hope you really understand this, again, especially wherever you are in the spectrum or when you're communicating with other people, is this stuff is real. I mean, there really is a lot of fear around doing something that is very different than what they've always done or what they know and what they've been taught. So many of our blocks really have to do with fear. And I think that is the biggest thing. I've always said that I don't think people are afraid of being vegan. I think people are afraid of change. We are creatures of habit. We like things to be the same way. We don't want to change. We are afraid of change, but mostly not just being afraid of change, kind of knowing what's on the other side, but change where you don't know what's on the other side. So there's a lot there. So when you just look at nutrition, obviously, one of the things I try to do, as I said, I'm just a conduit. I am not a nutritionist, but you do not have to be a nutritionist to understand some basic concepts about, using your own common sense to make decisions that are going to be the healthiest for you. And so one of the problems is that we have all been taught that the nutrients we need are animal-based, right? Most of us have been taught that. If I asked you where we should get calcium, you would say, don't say kale, because most people do not say kale. You would say cow's milk, right? I mean, I would say that I do think people these days are saying a bit more kale. I do think people are understanding that a little bit more. But for the most part, as soon as you tell someone you're vegan or vegetarian, mostly vegan, the first question they're going to ask is, exactly, well done. So where do you get your protein? Where do you get your calcium? Now, again, I have a lot of episodes and content on how to respond to these questions because I really do believe that people know the answer to these questions. They don't need me to tell them. If you gave it a moment, they would stop and think for a second. But really what the bottom line is that we are going through the animals to get to the nutrients that the animals get because the animals eat plants. I mean, that's the bottom line. And so you can just share that with anybody and people understand that. So obviously, what is calcium? It's a mineral. And where are minerals found? Not in cows. They're found in the ground, right? And so why are we drinking an animal's milk? Why does it have calcium? Because it does, because the animals eat grass, theoretically, because, in the factory system that we have, they are not grazing on grass, not in the dairy industry. And so they're supplementing the feed with calcium. You could supplement your feed with calcium. Or you could go directly to the source and get calcium directly from those green leafy vegetables that the minerals just go right up into. That's why grass has high amounts of calcium, right? And so, but right now what we're doing is this crazy, I just do believe in my heart of hearts, it's just an antiquated system. Maybe it worked when we were an agrarian people, an agrarian society, and people had their own goats and people had their own, if they had a cow, because that was expensive. But, at a time when like 90% of the population was agrarian, that may have made sense. People did have limited calories and they did need to make sure they were getting their nutrients, right? But not anymore. Like we have information now and we have access now that we never had before. And so what we're doing now is this incredibly antiquated thing where we bring animals into the world in order to, impregnate them, in order to take the milk from them to get the calcium that we're already giving them through supplements. And we're taking their milk, and if you actually asked the offspring of those animals where they're getting their milk from, especially once they're weaned, or I could ask you, where do you get your calcium once you're weaned? I don't think you're nursing anymore. Anyone in this room? Unless you're a baby. Unless you're a baby, right? But the idea that we literally are drinking the milk of another animal whose offspring have stopped drinking their own mother's milk to get a nutrient that is in the ground or they were getting from supplements doesn't make any sense, right? And so you could do this with every nutrient. You could do this with omega-3s. Where are we told we're supposed to get our omega-3s from? Fish. And why do the fish have high amounts of omega-3s in their flesh? Because they're eating algae, right? So we can go directly to the source, again, and not contribute to all of the environmental harm and the ethical harms and the health harms and all the things, right? Now, there's a lot to say about that. It's not that these nutrients aren't important. They are very important. The point is that we learned about the sources of these nutrients before we really understood the nutrients themselves and the actual foundational sources of them, right? And so you can do this with protein. And of course, protein is the number one question everybody gets. And again, protein is important. I've been doing an entire podcast series about how we actually do need to get more protein than we think we need, especially as we get older, and especially for women who are in postmenopause and not making estrogen anymore that did the protective things that we don't get anymore because estrogen isn't there. So we do need to make sure we're getting all of these nutrients. But the point is that the nutrients we need are plant-based, not animal-based. The only nutrient that's not plant-based or animal-based is B12, is vitamin B12, and it's synthesized by bacteria. So that's the only nutrient. But again, B12 is supplemented in the feed of beef cattle. So again, this really archaic system where we're going through these animals, raising them, bringing them into this world, and only to kill them is the most macabre, script for a horror movie. I mean, it is just a macabre system. And that's why I believe in my heart of hearts that we will evolve. There's just a lot of muck still, and it's just a lot of old stuff. And a lot of the reasons we do what we do is because we've always done it. So it just takes a long time for us as a species, for us as individuals, to make the changes we know are better. But of course, when we skip the middle animal, we're not only getting the good stuff, we're getting the phytochemicals, we're getting the antioxidants, we're getting the fiber, none of which are in animal products, and we're skipping all of the stuff that we don't need. The animal-based protein, the animal-based saturated fat, the dietary cholesterol, none of which are in plant foods, right? So that's the first thing, is for people to feel empowered. I mean, I've had parents say to me, like, they're terrified of their children stopping eating of cow's milk or drinking cow's milk because they don't want them to be unhealthy. And of course, it's absolutely right to want to do the right thing. And we just need the information. And we all know this. I mean, doctors are not trained in nutrition. Fine. And then there's nutritionists who just have every theory on the planet. So I am not here to give you any theory. Just eat plants is the point, right? Because the diseases that we have in economically developed countries are not diseases of deficiency. They are diseases of excess. The expression diseases of affluence was started in the 19th century, right? So we have diseases of affluence, diseases of excess. We do not have diseases of deficiency. Anybody here with kwashiorkor? Anybody with kwashiorkor? Anybody know any kwashiorkor specialists in their hospital? Kwashiorkor is a scientific term for protein deficiency. Anybody? No. Do you know anybody who has kwashiorkor? Do you know anybody who is a specialist in kwashiorkor, right? Rickets? Anybody with rickets? Anybody with scurvy? Anybody with beriberi? No. Okay. So again, those are diseases of deficiency, and there are nutrient deficiencies, especially in places where people are not getting food. They're not getting their nutrients, right? And that's real for many people. But for those of us in economically developed countries, we are eating plenty. And we are not getting our nutrients in the best way, but we are not dying of the diseases of deficiency. We're dying of diseases of excess, right? So we're dying of the heart disease. We're dying. Do you know anybody with heart disease? Do you know anybody who's on cholesterol-lowering medication? Do you know any heart specialists? Do you know any cardiovascular wards in the hospitals? That's what our problem is. So we do not have diseases of deficiency. We have diseases of excess. So that's just the stuff around nutrition, right? And it's very simple, though it's very difficult for people to make a shift. The other excuses and the myths and the misconceptions that people have are certainly mostly, it's around food, but it's not the food itself, it's our self-perception. So, we're not very good at self-selecting, we're not very good at really knowing what our behavior is. So anybody who I've ever told I'm vegan to, the first thing they say is not where to get your protein. It's usually, I don't eat a lot of meat, is usually what they say. And for those of you who know my work, I love these conversations, by the way. I do, I love these conversations. But the point is, you do not know how much you eat until you stop. Because somebody's eating the meat, because 10 billion land animals are killed every year in the United States alone for human consumption. A lot of animals. So someone's eating it. But no one thinks they are, right? Everyone thinks they don't eat a lot of meat or dairy or eggs or whatever it is. And so the truth is you don't know how much you eat until you stop. That's why I wrote the 30-day vegan challenge. Fine, I'm not telling you to go vegan. Just try something different for a length of time that is going to enable you to not only identify your habits, but also change some. Because we are creatures of habit. I don't know about you. We go to the same restaurants. We order the same thing. We eat the same foods. I think we rotate the same dishes, 6 dishes, for years. We rotate the same thing. And then people go I don't know, there's no variety in vegan. What? Everybody just rotates the same thing over and over. Do not tell me that non-vegans are eating such a variety of food that they don't even know what to do with it. We all just get stuck in our own habits, right? So if you're doing something for 30 days or 15 days, whatever it is, it does compel you to go, I've been ordering this all the time, but now I'm doing this challenge. Oh my God, what's over here? I've never seen anything over here. You were here, but you didn't see it because you're just locked into this, myopic kind of habit. And so it compels you to go oh, there's a restaurant I've never seen before. I have friends, a neighbor, oh, I've been doing vegan. Do you know there's a restaurant down the street, it's a vegan restaurant? Yes, I did. That's wonderful, right? Or, did you know apples are vegan? Yeah, I know, I did. So the truth is you don't know how much you're eating until you stop. So we just have to give ourselves the chance. And that then becomes the habit. You just have to trust it. And this is what I would say to anybody who's talking to anybody who's not vegan or just thinking about it. It doesn't matter. Just do something different. Just try something new, right? Everybody can do that. Everybody can do anything for 30 days. Because the best proof is going to be how someone feels, what their biometrics look like, just knowing that it's matching their ethics. There's just so many beautiful things that happen when we stop doing the behavior long enough to just really reap the benefits, some of which are measurable and some of which are not. But they're anecdotal and we know it, we feel it. I can't measure the compassion I feel, but I know it's there, and it feels pretty darn good. So that's some of the stuff. The stuff that I hear people complain about is the time it's going to take to cook. People complain about chopping vegetables. I know, everyone's snickering because, it's touching a nerve. Because we have this perception, I don't know, we just do this all or nothing thinking that we think if we're going to cook, we're going to have to be in the kitchen for an hour. You don't have to be in the kitchen for an hour. I love to cook. I don't want to be in the kitchen for an hour. I don't, right? But the idea that we literally have this measurement, I think right now, we think if we spend more than 0 minutes in the kitchen, we think it's too long. So we need to change the barometer. It's true. If I said to you, take 15 minutes to prepare food, it is 15 times greater than 0. But do we really want 0 to be our measuring stick, right? So let's just raise the bar to 5 minutes or raise the bar to 10 minutes, right? Because again, if we don't have time to be sick, then we have to make time to be healthy. That's up to us. So we can talk about the marketing, we can talk about all of the conditioning, and we can talk about all the big ag and whatever. In the end, it is up to each one of us to make the choices that are going to reflect our values. And so the excuses I hear around cooking is also around chopping vegetables. And then grocery stores have figured this out, so they're chopping your vegetables for you. And then everyone's obsessing about if the nutrients are in the vegetables that have been chopped in advance. Oh my God. And then there's packaging, a lot of plastic, and the vegetables that are chopped in advance. Now listen, if it is going to help you eat more vegetables, to get vegetables chopped in advance, do it. I 100% support you in doing that, whatever it's going to be. And maybe there's some weeks that you are less busy and you have time to chop vegetables, and some weeks that you're busier and you can't. Then be honest with yourself, right? But literally the idea, we literally have like carrots with tops on and we're like, I can't. It's too hard. And then like literally people just leave them in the refrigerator and they go, how do I keep my vegetables from going bad? Eat them. Your refrigerator is not a compost bin, but that's how we treat it. So that is the best advice you're going to have all weekend, is to stop vegetables from going bad in the refrigerator. Eat them. I've had people say like, I know I figured out a way to like keep my celery for like 3 weeks. And I'm like, why do you want to keep your celery for 3 weeks? The whole point is to actually eat your celery. So eat them. So those are some of the excuses people make around food. And again, that really has to do with their own self-perception. And then I hear a lot of people talk about craving meat, people who say they tried being vegetarian or they tried being vegan, but they just craved meat. And I hear this a lot. So I craved meat, I was craving a burger, and then I had the burger and I felt good. And there's a lot to say about that, because I do think when people remove something that's very familiar, they're restricting their calories usually, and they're hungry. And so of course, if you're going to fill your belly with more calories, you're going to feel better than if you were hungry, right? So there is something to say about that. But the problem is that we have this perception that specifically it was the animal flesh that made them feel satisfied or what have you. Now, there is something about that made them feel satisfied, but that is because we don't crave the flesh of other animals. We are not obligate carnivores, as much as some people right now on the internet want to talk about how we are carnivores. We are not physiologically built as carnivores. We are omnivores, but we resemble herbivores a lot more. And we're not doing so well on eating all of the animal products we are eating. So the point is, we do not crave the flesh of other animals. If you want to know what it looks like to crave the flesh of another animal, just think about what a cat looks like when they see a bird outside the window. Do you ever see a cat see a bird or a squirrel, and they go, and then their eyes dilate and their like butt starts to wiggle and they start to drool a little bit? Is that how you get when you see a bird flying past you or passing some deer on the side of the road or cattle? I don't want that. I hope that snickering isn't I can identify with that. I'm sure you don't, right? Because we do, because that's what it looks like for a carnivore to want to eat another animal. That's not how we respond. But we do crave, and I use the word crave in quotes. We do crave flavor, we crave fat, we crave salt, we crave familiarity, and texture. The last one was, right? We crave fat, salt, familiarity, texture, and flavor. And so when people say to me, like, I was really craving, meat, I tried being vegetarian. Usually it's for like a day, but like, okay, give it some more time. But I say, if it was probably fat, like, make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, have an avocado on a sandwich, make a smoothie with peanut butter or almond butter. If it was salt, have some salt. The most amount of sodium in our diets is from animal products anyway. So have some table salt, it's fine, or tamari, or something that's going to give you that salty flavor. But if it's also something that's just familiar, so it's like something in a bun that looks like a hamburger you used to eat, then that's why we have all these wonderful plant-based meats and burgers. And I don't want to hear from anybody about like how that's not okay. It is okay. It literally is great that we have all of the things that people can still have and feel familiar to them, especially as a transition food, because what happens is when you start to eat cleaner, you actually want to eat cleaner, right? You definitely want to eat things that are just more whole foods. Fine. The point is everybody's on the journey, and like I want to be able to guide people, wherever they are on this journey. And so that's the point, though. It could be flavor. How many people have spices in their kitchens? How many people have dust collecting on those spices? How many people have had those spices for 6 months or more? A year? 2? Thank you for your honesty. Right? So we have all these things that add the flavor to our foods, and they're collecting dust, right? And then people say, like, I don't think vegan food's not really flavorful. Really, what do you flavor your meat with? You put ketchup on it and mustard and relish and spices and barbecue sauce. We flavor meat with plants, okay? But we're not taught that. I mean, I grew up eating everything that had cream sauces and butter sauces. All of my vegetables were covered in some kind of animal product, right? So people don't really know the subtlety of the flavor of vegetables. And that's where we come in, where we can cook for them and bring them to wonderful restaurants that demonstrate that. So the idea is that it's not about craving animal flesh, it's about craving fat, salt, texture, flavor, and familiarity, right? And then another excuse people use, not an excuse, it's just, again, it's the self-perception. It's really the self-limitation. Is they'll say something like, I could stop eating cheese. I could stop eating, eggs. Actually, they never say cheese. Let me back up. They say, though, they could stop eating pork, chicken. I don't like chicken. I don't really eat it. I don't really like beef. I could really stop eating it, but I can never give up X. The X really usually is cheese. But I ask them what they're eating now. And they say, well, everything. And I said, but you just said you could stop eating everything else except for cheese. So why don't you stop eating everything else but cheese? And they go, I never thought of that. It's brilliant. The idea that we do nothing because we think we have to do everything makes absolutely no sense. It's self-defeating and it's nonsensical. Yes, this comes from someone who wrote the 30-Day Vegan Challenge because, again, everybody's going to respond differently to different things. But even then, it's saying just doing something different long enough for you to experience the benefits. But to not do nothing because we think we have to do everything, I think that's where most people get stuck. Don't do nothing because you can't do everything. Do something, anything. And every step we take and every step we encourage anybody else to take is going to bring us closer to the values we have, the goals we have, the things we care about. That's the point, right? But people feel like they have to do everything, and especially when they meet someone who's vegan, And it's really important for me to tell my story and to remind people when I'm talking to them that, no, I am no different. I completely went through this just like you did. There's a lot of people who say, like, oh, you've been vegan your whole... No. I ate this way my whole, until I was in my early 20s. So I totally get it. But the idea is that we at least give ourselves the opportunity to do something different and to guide people to do that as well and to not make it a purity test because everybody is on this journey and everyone's going to be imperfect and it's not about being perfect. And that's the other aspect that really trips people up is the social aspects. And that is really what the Joyful Vegan is about. It is about navigating a non-vegan world where it is very hard to understand that we will choose being part of a group and belonging over our own values. Thank you. Thank you. They were clapping. I was kidding. But it's really hard because I know a lot of people who are already on this side and they're already vegan and they hear about people, they see their friends, they see their family members, they know they're good people, but they haven't made the change or they stop being vegan, and that's what this book is about too, like why people stop, because people do, and then we want to say, well, they were never vegan in the first place. Yes, they were. There are reasons people really struggle, and a big part of them are social. So coming together at a place like this and an event like this and finding community and finding other people who are like-minded, it's so important. But one of the things I talk about in that book is also making sure that we're in community with the people who maybe aren't where we are in terms of being vegan, because they are our fathers and our brothers and our mothers and our sisters and our daughters and all the things, right? Because we are many things, we have many identities. But it can be really difficult to navigate as someone who's going against the status quo, especially if it's not part of your personality. That's one of the things I'm most proud of is helping people kind of find their voice, not in a way that's going to make you feel like you're rude, but in a way that's going to allow you to just feel at least that you're voicing your own voice and knowing where you end and someone else begins. So we talk about that a lot in terms of communication. So really understanding that I think is really important because honestly, I do think that it is not about anybody else. It is not about our families. It's not about our culture. It's not about our society. It's not about big ag. It is about what we do and what our choices are. And everyone says they want to make a difference, but I think we forget in order to make a difference, we may have to do something different. We just have to do something and stretch our comfort zones that's different than what we've always done. Because I know that in all these years I've been doing this, I know one thing for sure, and that is it's not that we can make a difference, it's that we do make a difference. Everything we do, everything we buy, everything we eat has an impact on someone or something else. We don't get to decide whether we can make a difference or not. We get to decide only if the difference we inevitably make is negative or positive. That's it. Those are our only two choices. And I think that's incredibly frightening for people, and I think it's incredibly empowering for people. It's incredibly empowering because it means we get to choose and we have the agency. But it's incredibly frightening because it means we get to choose and we have the agency. So in the end, it does come down to the choices that we're making that reflect our own values and knowing that everything we do really has an impact. We just have to decide whether we want it to be negative or positive. So that is my hope. That is my message, that we all go out in this world and manifest our values of compassion and wellness and kindness and realize that we do have the power to create the world we all say we want to have. It's just a matter of what we want to do step by step, day by day, and you are not alone. There are people here to support you. So I'm one of them, and thank you for being here, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Woo-hoo. Now, thank you, guys. Do we have time for my favorite part, which is the Q&A? No one's here. I don't know what happened. There's just like anarchy here. Is anybody here to tell me what to do? I think the next person comes in at 2. Not that I'm going to do this till 2, but like I think we have, okay, no one's saying no. So my favorite part is the questions. So if you have any questions or thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Yes. And I'll repeat it if you can't hear the question.
I've heard so many times people say they went vegan and then they felt sick and they had to eat meat to feel better again. And I just don't really, frankly, believe that. But I guess they think that. And so what do you say to people?
Yeah. So one of the things everybody hear that question? So one of the things I talk about is I know we get the same questions again and again, but that moment that person is asking me that question is the first time I've ever heard it from them at that moment. And I want to really honor that because I know it's really triggering to want to say this is something we've heard and it's just an excuse and everybody's doing it, whatever. So when that moment is happening, the first thing I definitely don't want to do is deny that that's their experience. So I want to make someone accountable for what they're saying, and I will ask them more questions. And I think for those of us who are on the other side, who went through our own excuses and justifications, we know what that looks like. First of all, remember that we had justifications and excuses, and we have to remember that we did too, is what I want to do is I think what happens is we want to have the answers. And I think one thing that can be very helpful when we're talking to anybody all the time, not just on this subject, is to be curious and ask them questions. And it also holds people accountable. Holds me accountable if someone pressed me on something that I said, right? So tell me more. What do you mean? What happened? What did it feel like? What were the symptoms? Who did you talk to? What help did you get? Right? Ask them more questions and get more information from them because there probably was an experience they had where they didn't feel well and they thought maybe they talked to someone, whatever. The experience I have had with people who are at least engaging me with a conversation is that they actually want to do better. They want to do something different. They didn't want to do that. And sometimes I'll say that too. I didn't really want to, but my nutritionist said whatever. But I often find that they come to the conclusion themselves when I'm just quiet and I let them get to the place where they go, I don't think I was eating really healthy, or I don't think I was eating enough. I think I was hungry a lot. So I can then be the safe place for them to then say, I totally get that. So what you need is this, and here's some recipe, blah, 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 whatever, right? But I want to at least engage in a way that is going to make them feel heard. And whether or not it's true, I don't know. It may or may not be true, but it was their experience, right? So ask more questions, get more data, and create a camaraderie and a trust in a relationship. I just think I joked when I said that I, felt compelled to to be an expert in nutrition and philosophy and animal husbandry and ecology and the culinary arts. But I think we do because it touches so many of these areas. But I also think that we can also listen and ask questions, and I think that can be as effective. Yeah. Yes.
Could you speak to the difference or distinction between when you say I'm a vegan or something, which is like an identity statement, versus like I'm making compassionate choices or I'm making vegan choices versus I'm a vegan?
Oh, I have so much to say about language. I mean, language is so interesting. And, I identify as vegan. It is a shortcut. Like I said, it takes a lot longer to say, I removed the blocks to the compassion that was always inside of me. But I will make sure that comes out, So I do believe very strongly in context and timing and relationship and sincerity of conversation. If I'm in an elevator with someone and they don't really care, and I'm not going to see them again, and they're not really asking me sincerely to have a conversation, my answer might be different than I'm sitting down with someone who I have a relationship with, if we're eating, if we're not eating, if it's a neighbor, if it's a friend, whatever, right? So I think for me, the word vegan means something, but I do tend to use it to talk about me as an identity rather than food or an item or a product, because that's a very different thing, because I just don't see an apple being vegan. Like the apple's not eating anybody. So I just don't see it that way. But what I also think is it really, sometimes if I'm at a restaurant and I say like, can you tell me what your items are? I'm vegetarian. I might say vegetarian sometimes first. And then they go, oh, are you vegan? And I go, yeah. I'm also just kind of like trying to meet people where they're at. So I'm using language that's also going to connect us rather than make it feel like we're different people. But when I'm talking about food, I will say plant-based, but I'll also interchange the word vegan for compassion. So it just depends. Now, I'll say also the whole idea of plant-based versus vegan. I think whatever is going to be the phrase for you in that moment, or the term for you in that moment, in that relationship, that's the most authentic is how we should represent. There's a lot of dogma and a lot of doctrine that happens in any community or communities. And I think that's one of the problems, is that we just get really hung up on the labeling as opposed to the communicating. And I want to communicate more than just be right. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that answered your question, but a little bit. Well, we'll talk afterwards then. Yeah.
Hey, Colleen. Big fan of the podcast. Thank you. I love it when you mention Bay Area places to check out as well. My question is, what are your thoughts or advice when it comes to those situations? Usually it's a family situation where it could be a dinner and you're the only vegan there. And I find it hard to be joyful, even if the food I'm eating is good, because everybody else is sharing a communal meal together and I feel off to the side. And on top of that, I feel very self-conscious because I feel like they will see me as probably the only vegan they know, and then they see it as something that's not desirable. So what are your thoughts and advice on that?
There's so much there. So yeah, because it's like how I'm feeling, not feeling part of everything because food is such a communal event. It's also how I'm feeling maybe seeing animal products when it's painful to see. It's also me perceiving them, perceiving me a certain way. It's me perceiving them a certain way. So honestly, all of those interactions that we have with anybody, everywhere, all the time, the way I manage it happens long before I show up at that event. And it is the work that I do every day to bring compassion to my thinking, to my perception, so that when I'm entering a space that is challenging, I'm in a place that can be open and receptive. And it depends on my mood. It's not always going to be the same. And it's not always going to be perfect. And there might be some events I don't go to because I don't want to deal with it, right? So it's not always I don't know. I think I said on the podcast once that there was a time where I didn't go to barbecues. And I changed my mind about that because I'm missing an opportunity. Again, if I'm not in the mood, I don't go. I don't make it like I have to go. But I'm missing an opportunity to represent, the food that's there, how delicious it is and how wonderful it is and how I'm a normal vegan, I'm a normal person, right? But it really depends. I love those engagements. I love the conversations we get. But if someone, sometimes we can get the stupid joke, nasty, whatever. And whatever, I like it all because I really love connecting with people. But the answer to your question really depends on what are you solving for? If we're solving for being among our community and being among our people, if it's a family event, I'm there for a wedding, celebrating someone's wedding, then I'm going to, kind of make decisions that I have to make to this isn't about me. And it's about me, if I'm going to eat, I'm going to eat. Someone's going to ask me about what my food is and it's going to be better than anything anybody else is eating. We know that, right? So for me, it's just a matter of kind of preparing beforehand, sometimes having support if you can, but the support doesn't have to be another vegan. It can be, a family member there, right? And I just have to just know what the point is. It's just not perfect all the time, but I just do my best to show the abundance, show the compassion, show the joy, and everybody's going to have a different opinion no matter what. I can't control that. I mean, literally, it's what I said before. We have to know where we end and another person begins. And that is in every aspect of our lives, including in this one. So, I don't know. I see it as an opportunity for, just bringing my best self. And that's it. Like, whatever's going to happen from that, it's not mine. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if that helped you either. Maybe a little. I guess not. Anyway, anything else before I know that there's another talk coming in? One more question in the back. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's true for sure. But it's the fat. It's the fat. It's the fat, and it's the salt. If you cured my arm, it would taste as good as a pork loin. Is that what it's called? I don't even know what it's called anymore. Yeah, everybody, I did not say you can find... So I'm at a table. I'm only going to be here for another hour, so I do have some of my books, and you're welcome to come over and talk. Joyfulvegan.com is my website, and you'll find a page where you subscribe. You can subscribe for free. There's a paid, but you can subscribe for free, so please do. And there you'll find all the trips, because they're pretty amazing. We just got back from Croatia. We're going to Japan again in April, then Italy, then Galapagos, and we've already had our meeting about 2027 trips. 26 is already sold out, so 2027 trips are coming up. Anyway, you're all amazing. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here, and I'll see you later.